Chapter 1, BTS. Hi there. Hope you're doing something fun right now while listening to this podcast. But let's face it, if you're like me, you're probably doing chores or driving. Maybe you're mowing the lawn. I know I have, but I also know my wife doesn't like it when I do that with the podcast on, with my headphones on. I think it's the perfect time, in my opinion, to listen to one. You know, other than the whole danger and safety side of things. I also like mowing with sandals on or even barefoot. I just love the feeling of the grass underneath my bare feet. But yeah, safety. So I totally get it. Anyway, welcome to episode 2 of The Card Diary by BTS Thompson. I am your podcast host. Still kind of weird to say that. But I am your podcast host, Denny Cards, on Instagram, Denny_cards. And the podcast account, Hobby S. Thompson, all one word, no spaces, no underscores or dashes. That's my podcast alias, being called Hobby S. Thompson. I don't speak for the hobby. This episode is called Chapter 1, BTS. Stands for buying, trading, selling. Can also stand for behind the scenes. I'm Korean American. I love the group BTS. Sad that they had to break up. But, military, actually I wasn't even thinking about talking about this. But you know what? I mean, I do want this to be evergreen content. But I would be remiss if I didn't, briefly acknowledge how I'm currently doing and what's happened in my hobby life since releasing the podcast in episode 1. That's really interesting because, the boy band, the Korean boy band, pop band, BTS had to break up. I guess there are many reasons, but, in Korea, there is compulsory military service. So every male between the ages of, I forget what it is, like 18 to 30, they have to do like 2.5 years. So today, I am recording this on Memorial Day in America. And happy Memorial Day. I just made a post on Instagram about some G.I. Joe cards I received completely coincidentally from my first ever podcast guest, which is a teaser. But it's crazy. I promise you, I did not plan to time this, talking about BTS and why they broke up and also it being Memorial Day. That really is complete coincidence. But, I didn't have any military servicemen and women cards. I mean, this part I was going to talk about, and posting about how, I don't have any Pat Tillman. I do have some nice David Robinson cards. I didn't have any nice ones, so I didn't post those. But I went with G.I. Joe, just the best with what I could do with my collection. But the more important thing, of course, getting back on track here, is remembering those who died serving our country, truly realizing that freedom is not free. And, I personally did not serve, but I have family members who have, and I love them very much. I am in the D.C. area, and this is a time when you can really, depending on where you live in this area, you can hear rolling thunder, the motorcycles, but I should be good inside the house, but I don't know how it's going to go, but I think that's the fun in all of this, right? So, hobby-related, I released this podcast last Thursday, May 25th. Not a notable day for any reason, but that was 4 days before recording this current podcast that you're listening to. And I don't know when you're going to listen to it, but May 25th, 2023. That very same night, I recorded my very first podcast interview for the show, and I am so excited to release that. It went pretty long. I may have to cut it up into 2 or 3 parts. And then the day after that, which is 2 days before recording this podcast episode, I don't know if I got the name, the days right, 3 days, I don't know. I streamed as a breaker for the first time in maybe half a year. And I can't wait to record that episode in the future about breaking and streaming to give you a behind-the-scenes look at that. On the gram, though, I posted a card adjacent picture of the water I was drinking when I was streaming. And it's just so important to stay hydrated when streaming. I mean, same as podcasting. I guess life in general, it's important to stay hydrated. Or maybe that's what Big Water wants you to think. And that reference is a shout out to the old Deadspin site. but I was drinking ionized alkaline water, pH 9.5 or 9.5, which I like to now call my Gem Mint water, and I think I may just drink a lot of this now. Not an official sponsor, but it's from Kirkland Signature, Costco's best. Would love if Costco started doing Costco exclusive mega boxes and blasters. Michael Rubin, just saying. Forget where I was going with this. Oh, stay hydrated, folks. Opposite from that stay thirsty, my friends slogan. So I streamed, I did a podcast guest episode. I'm recording this one. What else? I cracked some slabs, which I can cover later since I'm trying to keep this short. And I guess going back to this podcast, I checked the analytics, the data. I love looking at data and demographics. It's been 4 days since I released it. It's gotten 11 plays, which may not seem like a lot to some people, but a friend of mine said I would be lucky if I even got 10 plays. So take that, man. I already beat that number. So out of the 11 who listened, they kind of do this little breakdown, Spotify does. And I'll be honest with you, I still haven't done this on Apple. I haven't figured it out. Something with the RSS feed. Once I figure it out, I'll push out on all major streaming platforms. But this is me struggling through this. This is me figuring it out. And I'm just giving you a little behind the scenes, behind the curtain with this. So anyway, out of the 11 of you who listen, 9 of you are now following or subscribed to this podcast on Spotify, which that's awesome. Thank you very much. What's interesting is that 60% of you are from Canada, 40% from the US. For age breakdown, 20% are between the ages of 28 to 34, and 80% are between the ages of 35 and 44. And all of you are men, or identify as men. And so if any American woman below the age of 28 or over the age of 44 tells me she loves my podcast, you know what? I'm going to know that they're lying through their teeth. Okay? So don't do that. No, I'm just kidding. So for those of you who reached out to say that they liked the first episode, which I called it the prologue, and again, this is chapter 1. This is episode 2, but called chapter 1, BTS, buying, trading, selling. I just want to thank you for reaching out to me. I'm just going to shout out some names. Dave, Max, Sal, Dan, John, both with an H and without an H. Mike, Mikey. I mean, it's like literally almost every single person who listened pinged me to say kind words, which is kind of odd because I didn't know some of you were Canadian. Again, 60% of you are from Canada. I don't know. I didn't know that. I thought all of you were American. So anyway, I thought that was fun to share. But I should get to the meat and bones of today's episode because there is just so much to cover. So that's my intro and interlude. Let's get into it. Okay, so again, this podcast is about my journey so far into the hobby, re-entering it in September of 2022, sharing that out, sharing this podcast to see if it helps anyone or is at least entertaining. And the very first thing anyone really does when they get back into the hobby is, buy. And this is where I told myself, insert audio clip of InSync here. But wouldn't it be so great if we did a lot of research first? But yes, of course. But we all know that the fun is in the buying. I mean, any hobby. So the first thing I have to say about buying, at least for me, it's like trying to drink water through a fire hose. There's just so many places you can buy and so many cards that will either evoke nostalgia or just look shiny and cool. So the very first tip I have is to set a budget. But it's easy to say, do as I say, not as I do, because I know when I first started out, I didn't set budgets, but that also led to unhealthy spending habits that I would later regret. It doesn't even have to be a strict one, although that would probably be best, but just know that what you're getting into, especially if you're buying online, in a stream, in real time, when you're not, or even if you're not buying a stream, if you're buying online, you're not physically taking your wallet out and paying for things. And if you're not going to set a budget, I don't know how to or how much, then I would at least encourage people to, especially if you're re-entering into the hobby or even if you've been here for a while, track your hobby spending either in a spreadsheet or your notes app, whatever is easiest for you, whatever is the way that you're going to actually do it. Because I think it's just important to not, go into this mode of ignorance is bliss and, I'll figure it out later. I think it's good to kind of have a good general idea of how, your spending habits can be in the hobby. And man, I totally get it. Some folks may turn the podcast off at this point because we're talking about fiscal responsibility, but I'm just trying to be like your canary in the coal mine, because I know that later on I definitely did like regret, and I had to have some, pretty hard discussions, with my wife, because I just needed to be honest with myself and with her. So I do want to say again, just very briefly, if you're not setting a budget, if you don't have a lot, even if you have a lot of disposable income, you can easily become in over your head. And if you have family and people dependent on you to be fiscally responsible, that can lead to financial disaster. So again, just do you. I mean, you don't have to do any of this. I mean, we haven't even gotten to the cards yet. But I know that retail therapy is a thing. Gambling is a real addiction. Going to casinos, burning through cash that's in your pocket may be okay. But when you're dipping your card into the ATM once, twice, 3 times, that could be troublesome. So, but that's just life in general. So, and I'm not here to like get super preachy or anything like that. I just, again, canary in the coal mine. And let's see, what did I want to talk about? I mean, these cards, straight up, some of them are really expensive and may seem initially completely unachievable, even if you have like a lot of money to throw around. For those of us currently in the hobby, and I include myself with this statement that I'm about to make, is that it's almost like not real life money. And what I mean by that is like we almost become numb to the numbers. And I wrote in here with my podcast notes like like numbers, like cold. So you just get numb to the numbers. I guess if you say that word enough, numbers, it just loses meaning. But yeah, the numbers, the price tag, the sticker price, and it's almost like, in the real life context, it's like $1,000 can go so far, but in this hobby, sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, $1,000, I'll buy that and but it's okay because I'm gonna make my money back, or I'm going to flip it, or it's just the justifications that we come up with in the hobby can get wild. And speaking of that, I have definitely wondered personally myself if I have been using my childhood and nostalgia that I've talked about in the prologue, what has passed as prologue, and episode 1, I've definitely wondered if I've been using that nostalgia as an excuse to spend money on cards. For example, if I really just wanted a nostalgia hit, can't I just go get a bowl of Captain Crunch and put on some Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on a Saturday morning? That would be a lot cheaper, right? But no, instead I say I'm chasing my childhood as I spend my disposable income, within reason, definitely nowadays. But I spend that disposable income on cards I couldn't pull as a kid, or I didn't even know about as a kid. And then for the ultra modern stuff, I tell myself, well, I buy it so I can flip it to self-fund the hobby. But it's something I may have to talk about more, because this is maybe just too much intro. But the main thing, again, it can be like drinking water through a fire hose. For the newer folks, try not to develop FOMO, because just because you see the card in front of you, whether it's on the screen or in person, you think you really need it or you really want it, because chances are you will see that card again in the future, and possibly even for a better price. So just know that as the consumer with the money, you do have the most power in the hobby. Okay, so before I get into more buying, maybe that is a good, talking about prices, talking about comping. The first thing that happens, again, is when you get back into any hobby, is you start buying, and you will realize, there's a value on a card, or a price on a card. And I just wanted to briefly touch on that, because let's say you did collect as a kid, and you have those cards in front of you. You may value your childhood collection like intensely and go, oh my gosh, I would never sell this for anything. But if you're looking to get those cardboard cards out of your attic and try to see how much they're worth and sell them, you may see that the actual price on them may be really low. So the sentimental value you place on your childhood cards will not match the market price that you may have to want to sell them for. And especially if it's like the late 80s, early 90s, what was commonly referred to as the junk wax era, that it's just not going to sell for what you think it will, because you just have so much sentimental value. And you're just like, how can this, whatever card, because I'm trying not to talk about card prices and card names in evergreen content, but like, how is this card not worth what I think it should be worth? So just keep that in mind. But I am going to have another chapter or episode about selling. Let me pause here. All right, the first and foremost thing that you will hear a lot of people say about buying is buy what you love, collect what you like, variations of that. And what I think is meant by this is don't buy cards that people such as influencers are telling you that you should buy, whether that's an investment or, go buy the most recent rookies, in a sport that you may not even like or follow. And this section is going to be about comping, and I'll be honest with you, an entire podcast series can be made on comping, buying, selling, and this can be a very polarizing subject, but I have to start somewhere. And so for those newly entering the hobby, you're going to try and figure out, okay, I like these prices, how much are they actually worth? For the more seasoned veterans, you may feel like this part is not applicable to you, and that's totally okay. But I got to start somewhere, right? So there are definitely many schools of thoughts on comps, but I'm going to talk about two. One is people who the school of thought of using comps as the end all be all, and then the second is using comps as a starting point. I'm not going to say one is better than the other, but I think my personal preference is that it's the latter, but with some nuance. So here we go. So if there's a card that rarely pops up online or in person for sale, or like a truly rare card, like 1 out of like 5 or 1 out of 10, then I think there is going to have to be a premium to get that card. Conversely, if you see a lot of sales for a card like one of these recent ultra modern graded rookie base cards, those are a dime a dozen nowadays, and there's a very well established price on them. And so comps or comparison points that you'll see are going to be very close to each other, and there's going to be very little standards of deviation. So I don't think you would have to pay a premium on those not so rare cards. But again, for the newer folks, comps, there's eBay sold, definitely filter for sold, not just what's available as an auction or as a buy it now price. There's also websites and apps that have that I guess collect the data from eBay sold. Like there's a website called 130point.com. That's 130point.com, and gives you a history of sold cards, not just on eBay, but auction houses like PWCC and Golden. And then Card Ladder is an app that people like to use even more thorough history of sold cards, not just with data points, but like almost like line graphs, like stocks. Which we can talk about whether cards are investment pieces or art pieces, maybe at a later episode. But if you want the premium version of Card Ladder, you'll have to pay a monthly fee, which is like a Netflix subscription. I may or may not. Do I even talk about this? I may or may not have a password sharing situation. I don't know. I'm just putting it out there. Oh man, Chris Hodge is gonna be so upset. So there are also apps like Center Stage. Well, Chris isn't going to listen to this. It's all right. No one's going to... There's 11 of you who listen to this right now. Thank you. For the 11 of you, there's another really important tip. If you're not password sharing on Card Ladder, okay, if this ever... Okay, there are also apps like Center Stage where you can take a picture... Oh, and Card Ladder does it too, where you can take a picture of the card using your phone, and the app will try to give you more information about the card and pricing. Doesn't always work. It's captures as much information on the surface as possible, and there could be a glare, or it may not even be in the database. Your mileage may vary, but those are apps, some commonly used and widely known websites and apps for comps. And When you're searching for a comp, you can also utilize symbols. This is a little bit more advanced, but you can utilize symbols to have a better search result. For example, if the card you want is not a refractor or silver or hollow, which are shinier versions than the regular card, you can put a minus sign in front of the word hollow or in front of the word refractor, and the search should omit cards with that in the title. You could do the same thing with grading companies. If you don't want PSA, which is, I'm going to have a whole other chapter on grading companies and all that. But if you don't want BGS, SGC, these type of card companies, like if you don't want those slabs or holders, then you can omit using symbols in your search bars. So as the question about how to comp a card that has no comps, I mean, not that anyone asked, I just wrote, what about those cards? Like I'm talking to myself, which is what I'm doing right now. I think I'm going to leave that subject for another episode because that's a whole nother rabbit hole. But I will just say for now that, everything has a comp. Kind of like, what's that? I do love wrestling. Everybody's got a price for the $1 Million Man. That's my Ted DiBiase. I've seen him in some Comic Cons, and it's just sad when you just see them in the booth, just like eating a Subway sub sandwich. I won't go there. Okay, so everything has a comp, just might not be a direct comp of that exact same card. But you can use context clues, other comps, same card, different grade, different holder, different slab, or if those don't exist, you can use cards in that set. Wait, I think I just explained it. Okay, maybe I don't have to do it later. I don't know. I'll figure that out. Let me pause here again because I'm already losing. I'm getting sidetracked again. Oh man, we're already I think about 30 minutes in. Back on track, okay? Let's go. Here we go. If you're dipping your toes back into the hobby, you may be Googling for your closest hobby shop, and if you do, you type in hobby, you literally might be getting Hobby Lobby or Michael's or some craft stores. If you put in sports cards, you might not find anything. If you put in Pokemon, you might end up getting retailers like Walmart or Target. This system in the card industry, though, has been around for decades, splitting off production or print run of cards between retail on one side and hobby on the other. Retail packs and boxes, sealed wax, and hobby packs and boxes, sealed wax. The general rule of thumb is retail packs and boxes are going to be cheaper than hobby packs and boxes, but also result in lower ceiling hits, which are what the best value cards are. That's what they're called, hits in our pack or box. So the trade-off in general is retail is low risk, low reward. Hobby is high risk, high reward. Or better put, lower risk, low reward. It doesn't mean, though, that you're getting all duds and that in buying hobby you're going to get all bangers or hits either. So when it comes to retail versus hobby, it's reasonable for a newer person to gravitate towards retail. It's the more easily accessible product that's near the registers, the single packs of sports cards or non-sports cards at a big box retailer. So I won't go into that too much because you may have seen this, right? It's like the impulse purchases with lower price points. So what about hobby? If you're new to the hobby, you'll hear this term a lot in an abbreviated form, and that's LCS for local card shop. Seasoned veterans is all old hat, but for you know what? Something for the veterans, seasoned veterans in the hobby who think they have it all figured out. The reason I said abbreviated form and not acronym is, did you know that the definition of acronym is an abbreviation formed from the initial letters of other words and pronounced as words? So PSA and BGS, two grading companies, those aren't acronyms. Because it's not pronounced as word. You don't say PSA or Bugas, tag, which is another grading company. That is an acronym, tag. So anyway, I'm not going to get into all the acronyms and all that. But back to LCS, which stands for local card shop. Some people may try to call it a local card show. I don't know. But LCS, for the most part, stands for local card shop. Back in what I previously called the junk wax era, which is where card companies mass produced cards and flooded the market mainly due to high demand, which they were trying to cater to us consumers. There were card shops everywhere in the US. And I guess I should note that almost, every time I say everywhere, it's like, I'm in the US, it's US centric. For international listeners out there, got to remember Canada, 60%. You're probably used to the very American-centric viewpoints in the hobby and in podcasts. So, but I do apologize, if I slip into that Americanism or, like American-centric point of view. But going back to this concept of the LCS, back then, you just had no clue how to find LCSs, right? I just knew that my LCS was a block away from where I lived in my apartment building in Queens, and that within a walking distance of a 1 mile radius, 20 city blocks from my house or apartment building, there were 3 others, that I didn't go to as frequently. In the 90s, things were word of mouth, and, not searching for it online or pulling up your phone. I guess there was maybe a Yellow Pages or White Pages, but I don't know. I digress, right? Which you'll notice I do a lot in this podcast already. I'm just like the second episode. You can tell that I just go on all these tangents. But, I'll give your money back if you're not happy. So, as an adult, as a conscious citizen who is trying to do right by his community, I am all about supporting local, but really to an extent. For example, I love a good farmer's market, but I'm just not going to get all my groceries there. It is, priced higher than going to the grocery store. I definitely have a love-hate relationship with Amazon. It's just crushing mom and pop shops all across the country and in the world. But you really can't beat its price and convenience. So with LCSs in the hobby, I just know that hobby shops are where you can find hobby packs and boxes. You can also find them online, likely for a cheaper amount. But also, when you buy online, there is buyer beware, caveat emptor, because unless you're buying from a reputable source, you may find sealed wax that has been tampered with. More likely it hasn't been, but it does happen. So with an LCS, there is almost a guarantee that the sealed wax you buy there will be 100% legit, 100% fresh, not tampered with. But expect to pay more when you purchase from an LCS because there is higher overhead. That is it's inherent in any brick and mortar shop. 2 main costs for any business, whether it's in the hobby or not. 2 main costs. Fixed costs such as monthly rent and variable costs such as payroll for employees. So they got to pay that overhead. So you are going to pay more. But I do like to support local when I can. All right. So this is the moment in the podcast in my notes where I kind of wanted to reminisce about my LCS as a kid. So this isn't like information. This is just for me. I just wanted to talk about it. So back in the early 90s, I think I mentioned in the first episode that how it was my go-to place after school. I'm not going to edit that out. I don't like editing podcasts or anything. There are some things that I vividly remember about it, like how small it was. It was like the size of a postage stamp. I mean, it's New York City. Even though it's Queens, it can be expensive. So when you open the door, which was a glass door, it had the metal bars on it, like so many establishments in New York City. It had a bell ding at the top, so when you walked in the door, the bell would ring. The owner, who, man, I wrote down I didn't realize it, but she was a Korean woman, and which I only now as an adult realize how rare it is. To have a Korean minority woman in the hobby owning a hobby shop. That's really cool. But she would be standing there at the left. I would walk into her doorbell rings. She's standing on the left. She's behind the cash register. Behind her were white shelves with I don't remember if they're white, but just I vividly remember the hobby packs and boxes being behind her on shelves. She had, I think, maybe 4, maybe 5 showcases with singles. There were packs. What did I say? Yeah, there were the packs behind her on the white shelves. Maybe 2, maybe 3 packs and boxes, just like in Why am I fixated on these white shelves? All right, let's get back to it. Collector's Choice Basketball, $1. Top Stadium Club, $2. These are just price points that I kind of generally remember. Flair Showcase, $4. I could be wrong with all of that, but that's just kind of what my memory, serves me right now. So my friends and I, we would take turns opening up packs, seeing if one of us hits the best card in the box. I think, my friends who had more money, they would spend more, and I would just kind of try to spend or try to hang, but I couldn't, and that was okay. I tell myself that now, but we knew all the odds, right, of the box hits. They were placed right at the bottom or the back of the box, right? This is the Topps Upper Deck time when they would provide the pack odds or the hit odds. I think for folks nowadays, if you're re-entering the hobby, it's crazy because now it's like case hits. Not even box hits are no good anymore, guys. It's case hits. Oh my gosh, you gotta buy a whole case to find a case hit. So anyway, going back to my reminiscing, these friends, we would just take turns seeing if we're gonna hit the best card in the box. These are the same friends who I would play stickball with. Fire shootouts, which is literally playing basketball with the bottom rung of a fire escape ladder. I even remember when one of the older teenagers nailed a milk crate to the side of a building as a makeshift hoop for us. But now in hindsight, I think it was a trick because the ball could barely fit through the crate. And so, is the sound in my head right now, I hear of him, is he laughing? Is he cackling in my mind? Is that for real, or is that my fading memory playing tricks on me? I don't know. But those times, I don't know. I think about that a lot when I'm in the hobby, when I'm thinking about sports, when I'm thinking about these cards. And I didn't write this in my notes, and maybe I wrote it for like a different chapter because I have like a bunch of notes in different documents. But I just remember the absolute freedom in a way that we had as kids. Nowadays, and the reason I say this is because as an adult, I'm lucky and I'm fortunate that I get to coach both of my children in basketball, and there's so much information about there with YouTube about how to shoot better, how to pass better, how to be a better basketball player. There's basketball camps. My friends and I, we didn't have summer camps. Again, kind of going back to the whole like my family, my parents being immigrants trying to make it in America. They didn't know about camps and spending money in camps. Summertime was just free range. You talk about after school going to the LCS. Summertime, it's just like you're just living in the LCS. You're living in the library. You're living on the playground. You're just like completely unstructured. It's like no helicopter parenting. We're just like a pack of wild. I guess it was mostly boys, but feral boys, tweens, teenagers just roaming the street in the rough neighborhood of Sunnyside, Queens, also called Woodside. But so that's what I remember. Oh no, I think I messed up my audio. One moment. All right, I think we're back. I'm not gonna lie, straight up, I totally started closing my eyes and just reminiscing, and I think like I pulled on the cord that's tethered to my podcast mic. Shout out to Blue Yeti, by the way, not an official sponsor. But from my Blue Yeti to my phone, I like did something, and I'm like, oh no, did I just lose everything? Okay, so we're back on track, I think. We'll see. So we talked about buying at the LCS retail stores, buying at card shows. So, again, information on the internet explaining, well, it says here, I wrote down on my notes, explain how to search for card shows in your local area. Just Google it. Google card show, or I don't know, there's websites like, I think Beckett has their own thing. Sports card show, Pokemon card show, just put something card show. And if you find the right website, you'll see a bunch of city locations, American Legion halls, like a bunch of, open spaces, convention centers, whatever, local shows. There's also regional and nationals. But, you may start at your local card show and you might see some information, an address, for more information, call the promoter, and then you might see T and A. And this is family friendly, so I will just say tables and admissions. So the T stands for tables, A stands for admission, and hopefully the admission is really low, like $3 is what I've seen. I think some I've seen go for 5 or 10. Hopefully it's a really premium experience. For regional shows, you might expect to pay 10, national even more. I have to buy my tickets. T is for tables, how many tables there are, how many vendors there are. Doesn't necessarily correlate because it's not one-to-one. Like one vendor may have 3 to 5 tables if they have a lot of inventory. There are some people who even share tables. You might have 2 vendors sharing one table, especially if they're like just starting out. So tables and admissions, and when you enter your first card show, and again, I keep going back and forth. Who am I talking to? Newer entrants, seasoned veterans. I'm talking to the newer entrants, but when you walk into your first card show, I hope that you get that same endorphin rush that many of us have felt or feel. And with that rush, again, with that drinking water through the fire hose and the FOMO, there's just so much to see and do. But I would encourage you to not just go to the first table, see what you like and buy it right away, but instead take a lap, take a walk, see what's out there. And yes, you could be losing out on a great card or a deal if you walk by it. But again, going back to that, here's a little secret. For those of you who are coming back into the hobby, there are tons of great cards and tons of great deals out there. And what I've set up, and when I've set up as a dealer myself, and I hope to talk about this later on, maybe later chapter, is I remember being set up near the front of the entrance of a local card show, and this one kid, he wanted to buy one of my cards right away, just minutes in through the door, seconds even, and just saying, I want that Luca. And I actually was really taken aback, and I talked myself out of a deal. I told him I would hold a card for him, and I asked him, hey, just take a look, go walk, you just got here, walk around the local show, take a look at the other cards, and see if the card you want is truly the one you want out of the budget that you have. And just make sure about that decision before buying it, because I told him no refunds. You're not getting your money back. You spend money with me, you're not getting your money back. Or with anyone, but no, I'm kidding. 15 minutes later, this kid, and this is a true story, he comes back to my table with a new card in his hand. I think it was a different Luca. I mean, it wasn't my card, so I don't care. Sorry. I try not to say I don't care. If you hear me say that, I try to tell my kids, don't say that. Say, it doesn't matter to me. That's what I try to tell them. So, comes back to my table. He has a new card in his hand, and he was so happy with that purchase. And I was genuinely happy for him because, if he had purchased my card, my Luca, and he didn't have money for that other one that he thought was better, then he would have had some regret and some buyer's remorse. So even though I didn't make that deal, I thought it was a net positive. It was happy for him. I mean, maybe it wasn't positive for me, but I get to tell that story, I guess. So if you're going back to the card show, you're going to be walking around, and this is like a little more advanced, I guess, but I just wanted to mention it. But you might see people flipping coins, and you're like, what's going on here? Totally legitimate question, especially if they're recording. You're like, what's going on here? But, in case you're too new or too shy to ask, I'll try to explain it. When you're negotiating the purchase price of a card, the buyer and dealer may be really close to getting down to a final number, but just can't quite get there. So instead of walking away with no deal and no money transacted, no card transacted, one of the two parties can suggest a coin flip, where if the buyer wins, it's a lower price. If the dealer wins, it's a higher price. I used to be completely against this idea, and I thought it was just for show and just for Instagram. But I've done a personal 180 on that, and I feel like whatever helps to close a deal, do it. And if both parties feel okay with the outcome, then so be it. But I would caution folks not to jump, the newer folks to jump into this coin flip deal, because, I think it has to be a truly close deal, or for that margin to be really small so that there's lower risk. So I just wanted to explain the coin flip. I just put that on my notes, explain coin flip. Let's see what else. With coming back into the hobby space, I'm sorry to say it, some of you, you're going to be chumming the water. Experienced dealers, they will see your bright eyes and bushy tails. Much as you will try to mask it, it's noticeable. And I'm not even a experienced dealer, but I notice it. It's an aura. It's your body movement. It's your eyes. It's almost like if you live in New York City, you can tell who the tourists are. And maybe in the beginning you are a tourist, but what we want in the hobby, or what we should want in the hobby, is for you to want to stay long term and have a great experience. So, using that New York City tourist example, dealers shouldn't be looking to take advantage of this, the ingenuity, the naivete. We shouldn't be trying to rob someone in Times Square so that they have a bad experience and say they'll never come back to New York City. So I guess that's maybe more for the seller or dealer side, but, I would love it more if more of us, or not us like I'm a dealer, but more dealers, I would love it if more dealers did welcome folks in and share information and make an outsider feel welcome. Because, does it really have to be all about making that sale? Like the dealers are pushy. It just turns me off so much. Like, hey, so are you going to buy anything? I've had people ask me that. I'm like, excuse me, that is like the easiest way to just make me not want to buy anything. And you know who you are. Or maybe you don't, because you're not going to listen to this, because you're not one of the 11 who listen to this right now. So, back to the new person, okay? Like, welcome to the hobby. I'm so glad you're here. You may be the smartest person in your job or at school if you're, not working yet. You may be the smartest person in your community, field, or industry. But if you have no knowledge of the card world, it's kind of like sitting down at a poker table and folks can be ready to take your shirt. And at least that's how it can feel. But if you're able to talk to folks who are not trying to take your poker chips, who are knowledgeable and nice and have integrity, and they're looking to build a long-term relationship, not just a short-term transactional one, like a one-time deal, you can have fun at the poker table. You can have, hopefully we can be inviting and invite you in. But know that, some of the smartest people I know, doctors, lawyers, whatever, they can make impulse purchases. They can overpay for cards and all that. So when you're looking at cards, again, you're newer entrant into the hobby. Parallel numbering was introduced in the mid to late 90s as a way to counter the junk wax era, but arguably, a lot of us think, or some of us, I don't know, we might currently be in a junk wax era 2.0 with artificial supply and demand, with too much parallel numbering with different variations and colors. Because, when there's a card that of the same exact player and the same exact pose, and it's the same exact product, it's just a different shade or color in the background, is that truly, like a card numbered out of 100? Is that, it's not like there's only 100 copies of that card. Yes, maybe of that color, but not of that exact player and pose and year and set. So I'm not going to ask S Lady. I'm going to do it already because I don't want to mess up my phone in the recording. But I had already calculated, summed up the total with SIRI. Out of 250, out of 150, out of 99, out of 49, out of 25, out of 10, out of 5, and out of 1. What does that add up to? So I asked her that, right? And it adds up to 589, right? So you're thinking, oh, that out of 49 card is so nice. Out of 5 card is so nice. Well, it's really kind of like out of 589. So let's just keep that in mind. But of course, if you're chasing the rainbow, which is something that we'll talk about maybe a later episode, because this is already getting so long. We can talk about the different colors and numbering. Buying, I talked about retail earlier, but know that retail wax was so hard to come by at the start of the pandemic, and people were flipping it, buying it off the shelves, buying a ton, and then seeing if they could sell it on the secondary market. Nowadays, again, this is like May 2023, that retail wax is readily available in all retail stores for a good reason. People have realized that's, they don't want to do it, or, the market has spoken, and retail wax is just not the play for people. But so for buying it and just opening it up, it's great. You can go and buy your retail sealed wax if you want. What did I say about, or what did I want to say about? Okay, buying in real life at a show. Sorry, I just have like a bunch of just bullet points and talking points. I don't know. I like to do this. I don't know. It's kind of like a buying tactic. But when you're trying to make a deal and you are serious about a card and you want to buy it, and you're in negotiation process with the dealer, but they're kind of stuck on their price, I like to just kind of show the cash. I'm not pushy with the cash, but I kind of flash that cash. I show some leg, kind of do little, hey, look at this. There's a great scene with Kramer from Seinfeld, so of course I have to clip this now. There's a great scene with Kramer from Seinfeld where he tells Jerry to to put the big bills on the outside for his money clip, and he's like using $5 bills on the outside. I just thought that was so good. I mean, great show, of course, but you got to put the big bills on the outside. It's like, Kramer, that's a 5. So I like to show the cash, just to kind of entice the dealer, but you are not owed a card for any price. Just know that. Yes, you are, as the consumer, the one with the power, but don't unwieldily use that power, I guess. Just know that you're not entitled to cards just for any amount that you want. And I think just having respect throughout the entire process is important from both ends. Let's see, section on eBay. Actually, let's pause here. Okay, so we are running really behind, or at least in my mind. I thought that this was going to be a shorter episode, and my whole plan for this podcast was for it to be like short, to the point. I mean, I'll tell stories in here and there, but as you can see, I am sidetracking myself. But I hope you're having fun, and again, it's free, so enjoy it. eBay purchases, again, you can be the smartest person in the world, but there's such a psychology of an auction. You can have all the information in the world and know what you want to buy a certain card for, but as those seconds are ticking down, I know that I have been my own worst enemy in buying cards on auction. And even if you have all the knowledge in the world of card values, what are you going to do in that heat of the moment? What are you doing? What are you going to do when that timer is ticking down to 0? For not so rare cards, again, you may feel like, hey, there's going to be another one, so I don't have to overpay or pay an amount that I don't want. But sometimes when there's a rare card, or a perceived rare card, you're just like, oh my gosh, I really want this card. I put a note here. I don't know if I'm going to cover it, not just for time, but also it could be controversial. It's called sniping. The act itself isn't that bad. You just have to wait till the very last seconds of an auction and put your bid in and try to see if you can get it for that amount. But there is, fortunately, unfortunately, there are tools out there to help you with sniping. There's one called Gixin. I don't even know if just saying that word is controversial. So what I might do is just pin that conversation for later and see if it is a controversial topic, and you all, the 11 of you, will let me know. So let's move on to buying on Whatnot. So I came back into the hobby September of last year. Whatnot is the way I purchased first, before eBay, and in person. Well, a little bit of in person, but I really fell deep into Whatnot at the beginning. I knew about eBay, but I think for the pace that I wanted to buy in, Whatnot was just so much more addictive, because it was almost like eBay on steroids. Auctions were ending every second in any room you wanted, and eBay, yes, there are auctions ending every second, but for a specific card, you kind of had to wait for a 5 or 7 day auction to end for the card you wanted. So, for Whatnot, at least in the beginning, I would just have a secondary screen to do comps, and yet I will very much admit that my comp skills were terrible when I first started, which definitely made for some terrible purchases or overpays of singles cards. But I remember getting into, buying singles on Whatnot, and you definitely have to be careful. That's where the budget comes in, or tracking your spending habits. And then there's also the breaking aspect and the streams where there are breakers, big breakers. I won't mention the names, and then small breakers. There's a value, I think, though, into breaking and buying into breaks. And I wrote about this in my 2023 hobby resolutions post on Instagram. But I think the main gist is that there is a value to getting more product out there into the open market. I guess it's like, though it's like breaking sealed wax. It's almost like yes, it's a gamble for sure. There's a huge gambling aspect to that. But there's also like this analogy of like buying a car. It's like once you drive it off the lot, it loses like 60% of its value. I feel like that's how it is with wax sometimes. There's the cost of the box, and then unless if you don't hit like a major case hit or whatever, it's almost like as soon as you rip that seal, it loses 60% of its value. Again, that's just a random percentage I put out there, right? So I don't want people to be like, oh, it's a different percentage. So, I put in here, I thought I was going to keep this for the breaking chapter, but let me just say it since it's in my notes. There's a question of whether breaks are good for the hobby, and I've always said that good breakers are good for the hobby and bad breakers are bad for the hobby. So what makes for a good breaker? Oh yeah, that's why, because we're talking about buying in a break. Transparency is first and foremost. Shipping cards that are hit on stream, not taking cards off camera. I'll explain more about this in the later chapter about breaking and streaming, later episode. But for now, know that whether a breaker or streamer is big or small, it doesn't matter. If you don't get the cards you promised, then and people definitely develop reputations for that. But that is a big no-no. But the value in buying into a break, again, as a consumer, you get the team or player you want, but you're not guaranteed to hit anything. So the example I wrote in my notes here is that if you're a Lakers fan and you buy into a Lakers spot, you have the opportunity to get LeBron, but it also depends on the year of the product, right? Because he also played with the Cavs and the Heat, an older product and older in past years. But I think, you buy into a break because you want a certain team, your local team, or maybe the team with the hottest rookies, or maybe the teams without the hottest rookies. Some people like to pay less for teams that don't have coveted rookies because they just want value. And I think that the reason Ultramodern is what's being broken so much, because, I love my 90s cards, but you don't see 90s breaks, is because it's all about allocation and breaking new product. Allocation is something I just may have to cover in another episode because I am just running so behind in my own head. So certain rookies, certain classes, they're hot. There's a premium. What did I put in here? Kyle Lowry. Oh, so if you love Kyle Lowry and you want the Raptors, but if it's the rookie year of Scotty Barnes, you may have to pay a premium for the Raptors. I should take that out. Okay. Let's go on to the next point. When you're in a big stream with a lot of buyers, you're likely not going to get good value, because even though something may be advertised as like all spots, all teams are going for $1, they're not going to go for $1. They're not going to go for the floor, because some of these big breakers, they have such a following. And also when they have a bad stream or a small room, they have a Rolodex of previous buyers and friends, and they text them to get on it. And I'm not saying that's because they want them to shill, which is shilling is the act of bidding with no intent to actually purchase. But there is a way, like they just want to get interest generated. And so I'm not accusing people of like shilling their own breaks, but when people say, oh, this is going to go, we're starting this auction at $1, it's just like a marketing ploy. They're not going to go for $1, especially if these teams or the value in something is like, several hundreds of dollars. They're going to hit their minimums. They're going to hit their floors. So on this subject of a breakers or streamers Rolodex, again, we could talk about that in a future episode, but I really would caution anyone to buy so much that you become a breaker's favorite person, because now you've become their whale, and they'll say that they love you, but they don't love you. They love your money. They love your wallet. Some people may actually care, but for the most part, they want you to run your credit card. You don't want to be known as a whale. So I talked about the casino analogy before, so I'll use it again. A whale is someone who makes a big splash at the casino because they have a lot of money to throw around. They're the big spenders, and casinos cater to them because they know in the long run they'll make a lot of money off them. At the poker table, the whale is the mark, the patsy, the person who you want to siphon money off of. And when you start spending a lot of money in a stream, you're going to be lavished. You're going to be lavished with a lot of attention and praise. You're going to be called a legend, you're GOAT, you're awesome, like you're like the best person in the world. That this can also happen, by the way, if you're buying in real life, like at a local card shop or a card show. They'll just like And maybe it's because they do genuinely like you. But I know that, if you're going through a midlife crisis and have disposable income and you're just spending it everywhere, people do tend to start liking you a lot. But the problem is, in my opinion, is with being a whale in the poker world, which I used to do and I don't do anymore, but you tend to make big splashes at like an actual whale. You splash the cash, you splash the pot, but there's nothing elegant or smart about it. There isn't like, it's just, you're just spending. And another animal that they say at a poker table, it's like being a donkey. And so these sellers, whether they're breakers, but some of them, okay, I'm not speaking for all breakers and all buyers, but if they have your phone number and they try to contact you when they're about to go live or when they're in the middle of the stream, because and their $1 auctions are going too low, they may reach out to you because they know you have the means. And some of them, they may show, they might say they care for you. Maybe they do, okay? As a side note, I'm in a couple of like these dude group chats where, there does seem to be some community built, but I will admit, like much like in the Hunter S. Thompson style, I feel like I've embedded myself in with a group of Hell's Angels to see how the other side of the hobby lives. That's how I first came into it, but I do see some camaraderie and some value in those groups. But all I really am trying to say though is, as the consumer with the money, you do have the most power. It's not the other way around. So whether you enter or re-enter the hobby, don't just drink water through the fire hose. Don't just buy everything you see on site. I've been there. I get it. It's alluring, but it's like, God, this podcast episode is getting way too long. But what's the final thing I wanted to say? Much like dating and being at the bar when it's closing, nothing good comes out of being at on a Whatnot stream at 2 a.m. Okay, so. Wow, I didn't plan on doing this, but I think I need to break up the BTS, the behind the scenes of buying, trading, and selling. I think I need to break it up into a second episode. I think that'll mix up my chapters up too, but that's fine. Let me just end this without having to take another break to say thank you for listening to this far. I think once I add it up, it's going to be like an hour. So if you have an hour long car ride, that's great. I guess. Thank you for listening to this. Denny_cards on Instagram. Main account, Hobby S. Thompson is my podcast account. If you don't have an Instagram account, you can reach me at dennycards23@gmail.com or hobbysthompson@gmail.com. For the 11 of you who are listening, thank you. You are awesome. And I hope that you all have a wonderful Memorial Day if you are literally listening to this on the day it's released. Otherwise, have a great time in the hobby. Let me just end it. I have no good outro right now. All right. I gotta record the third episode right after this one. I gotta do it.